Managing a Premier League team tends not to be a job for life. The average tenure of a Premier League manager is about 1.4 years, according to a study by the League Managers Association, and that falls to about 9 months every time Watford win promotion. It's about as precarious as being a Russian opposition politician, except you get a multi-million-pound payout rather than being jettisoned out of a 12-storey window, in what can only be described as a tragic but unavoidable accident. Of the 20 managers at the start of the 2015-16 Premier League season, and the 25 managers who were employed by Premier League clubs that season as a whole, only one is still managing in the Premier League, and not for the club that they were managing 10 years ago. Can you guess who it is yet? That is a 4% success rate in terms of managers who are still in the Premier League, and, at the absolute most, there are only 3 out of those 25 who could be described as having gone on to bigger and better things since then, or at the very least, not having suffered fairly steep declines. The 2015-16 season was the most extraordinary season of the Premier League era, if not in the entire history of the English game. Leicester City did the unthinkable, winning the Premier League title as 5,000-1 outsiders, just 2 years after coming up from the Championship, and 16 months after they had been bottom at Christmas. Meanwhile, Liverpool finished 8th, their lowest league finish of the last 60 years, below both Southampton and West Ham United. Chelsea finished 10th, below Stoke City, in one of the worst title defences in living memory, and both Newcastle United and Aston Villa were relegated, the latter as one of the worst Premier League teams that we've ever seen. This is starting to feel like an episode of Premier League years. As the first direct observation of gravitational waves were announced by LIGO, confirming Albert Einstein's 1916 predictions, there was another genius by the name of Dimitri Payet making waves of his own in East London. Hurricane Patricia produced widespread flooding across Central America, but it was Odion Ighalo who was taking the Premier League by storm, scoring 15 goals for newly promoted Watford. The 2015 migrant crisis might have led to a spike in Europe's right-wing populist parties, but Leicester City fans were busy delighting as 2 Muslim migrants played a pivotal role in delivering them a shock Premier League title. Anyway, enough of that.
I'm not prepared to pursue my line of inquiry any further, as I think this is getting too silly.
Quite agree. Silly. Right, get on with it. Get on with it!
10 years on from a weird and wonderful Premier League campaign, I thought it might be interesting to take a look back at the 25 Premier League managers who were employed as full-time head coaches that season and what they're up to these days. And since you clicked on this video, hopefully you agree. If not, you have come to the wrong place and you are going to be left bitterly disappointed. Without further ado then, who was of course playing for the Tampa Bay Rowdies at the time, here is every permanent Premier League manager from the 2015-16 season, and where they are now. Arsene Wenger, Chief of Global Football Development at FIFA. One of the greatest Premier League managers of all time, Arsene Wenger turned English football on its head during the 1990s. At a time of rapid financialisation following the Premier League's breakaway from the Football League, Wenger brought about rapid professionalisation as well. Everyone else was forced to follow suit after Wenger dethroned Manchester United with half of Alex Ferguson's budget in the late 90s before going invincible in the 2003-04 season. Wenger could probably have joined any club in the world at that time, except for probably Man United, but he chose to build a dynasty in North London instead. Much maligned over the coming decade, as Arsenal ceased to challenge for the Premier League and Champions League, Wenger did at least keep Arsenal in the Champions League places, with only a fraction of the budget of his rivals, as Arsenal ploughed such huge resources into building the Emirates. The 2015-16 season was Wenger's third to last at Arsenal, and the Gunners were top of the league and favourites to win the title at New Year. They did the double over Leicester, who only lost 3 games all season, but a loss of form in January and February ultimately saw them finish 10 points behind the Foxes. Wenger's 22 years at the helm came to an end in 2018, after finally falling out of the Champions League places for 2 seasons, and the Frenchman hasn't taken another job in management since then. Since November 2019, Wenger has been FIFA's Chief of Global Football Development, where he has advocated for the World Cup being held every 2 years and defended the expanded FIFA Club World Cup, having previously bemoaned fixture congestion and the workload put on players at Arsenal. Tim Sherwood, pundit. Probably one of the worst managers to have ever managed in the Premier League, this was the season that Tim Sherwood's very brief managerial career came to a pretty abrupt end, and he has since turned his hand to being one of the worst Premier League pundits instead. In fairness to Sherwood, anyone would have struggled at Aston Villa in the 2015-16 season, as the club lost probably their two best players in talismanic top scorer Christian Benteke and club captain Fabian Delph, the latter a week after he released a statement saying that he wouldn't be leaving the club and couldn't wait for the start of the season, with Villa only having finished one place and 3 points above the drop the previous season. Alex Ferguson probably couldn't have kept Villa up that season, but Tim Sherwood sure as shit couldn't. He was sacked after 6 consecutive defeats and 9 games without a win, and his next job was as a director of football at League One Swindon Town. He resigned 7 months into the job after Swindon were relegated to League Two. Sherwood was replaced by Remy Gard that season, who ultimately took Villa down with just 17 points to their name, and he has also been out of work since being sacked by Montreal Impact back in 2019. Eddie Howe, Newcastle United. If you guessed Eddie Howe as the one manager from the 2015-16 season who is still managing in the Premier League, then give yourselves a pat on the back and a slap on the arse, because you were absolutely bloody well spot on. Reappointed by Bournemouth in 2012, who are his boyhood club, this was Howe's third season back at Dean Court, and his first in the Premier League, having first taken over at Bournemouth in League Two. Survival was the objective, and survival was the outcome, as Howe's side finished 16th in their first top-flight campaign, 5 points above his current club Newcastle, who finished 18th and were relegated. Howe's time at Bournemouth did ultimately also end in relegation at the end of the 2019-20 season, after which he took 15 months out of the game. He returned with Newcastle in November 2021, a month after the Magpies were taken over by the Saudi state. Newcastle's owners might be big fans of beheadings and mass executions, but Eddie Howe's head hasn't yet been on the chopping block by virtue of the excellent job that he's done in qualifying for the Champions League in 2 out of the last 3 seasons, and winning Newcastle's first major trophy in 70 years last season. In case you needed any further proof that Tim Sherwood is a terrible pundit, as well as a terrible manager, he said that Newcastle had, and I quote, no chance whatsoever of staying up after Eddie Howe was appointed in the 2021-22 season. Newcastle ended the season in 11th place, 14 points clear of relegation. Also, who could forget this classic?
I'm worried about these corners. I mean, it might come back to bite me here, but I think Tottenham have got the dominancy in the air there, you know, so I'm not sure anyone can get the head on the first ball for Liverpool, apart from that one.
Oh, Sim! It's Firmino in the 90th minute.
Wow, what a header.
José Mourinho, Fenerbahçe. This season was probably the beginning of the end for José Mourinho as an elite manager. Having won the league at Chelsea the previous season, the Blues had plummeted all the way to 16th and a relegation scrap when Roman Abramovich was forced into sacking Mourinho for a second time a couple of weeks before Christmas. At the time, it was widely perceived to be a blip, but in hindsight, Mourinho hasn't won either a league title or a Champions League since then, or even got beyond the Champions League round of 16. He has been sacked by Man United, Tottenham and Roma, and he now manages Fenerbahçe in the Turkish Super League. I'm not saying that he is a bad manager, just to be clear, or that he has done nothing since then. He won the Europa League at Old Trafford and the Conference League with Roma, but Mourinho was ranked as the best manager in the entire world in the summer of 2015, 10 years ago, by 442 magazine ahead of Pep Guardiola. And now he's managing Cengiz Under and Cenk Tosun in a league ranked below the Belgian Pro League by UEFA coefficients, where he finished second last season. That also answers the question of where Mourinho is now, Fenerbahçe. Though Mourinho was sacked in December, his replacement, Gus Hiddink, who was a friend of Roman Abramovich's, was only appointed on an interim basis, thus meaning that he doesn't have to feature in this video, but just in case you were wondering, Hiddink retired as a head coach in 2021 following 13 months in charge of the Curaçao national team. That was worth it. Alan Pardew, unemployed. The only manager to headbutt an opposition player during the Premier League era. Say what you want about Alan Pardew. No, really, you can say what you want about him. Pardew famously penned an 8-year deal at Newcastle in 2012, but by the time that contract would have expired, he'd just left ADO Den Haag after finishing second from bottom in the Eredivisie, having won just 4 games all season. A man with a longer list of controversies on his Wikipedia page than Colonel Gaddafi, Pardew was managing Crystal Palace a decade ago, who went on to finish 15th in the 2015-16 season, as well as reaching an FA Cup final. Now aged 64, Pardew has been out of work since leaving Greek outfit Aris Thessaloniki in February of 2023. Roberto Martinez, Portugal. A manager who is often accused of failing upwards, I actually think Roberto Martinez gets a bit of a hard time. He did a great job at Swansea, he won an FA Cup at Wigan, finished 5th at Everton, reached the World Cup semi-finals with Belgium in 2018, where they only lost narrowly to the eventual winners France, and he won the UEFA Nations League this summer with Portugal. Look, I'm not saying that he's perfect, but the idea that he was an unmitigated failure with Belgium is overblown, in my opinion, and the talents of the players and teams at his disposal have sometimes been a little overstated, again, in my opinion. 10 years ago, Martinez was just about to embark upon his underwhelming second season at Everton, in which the Toffees fell from 6th to 11th, and he has been the Portugal boss since January 2023, where he has won 21, drawn 5, and lost 4 of his 30 games in charge. Claudio Ranieri, Roma advisor. The mastermind, or certainly one of them at least, behind Leicester City's remarkable 2015-16 Premier League title win, Claudio Ranieri's time in Leicestershire was short but stunning. Brought in as a replacement for Nigel Pearson, after Pearson's son had been involved in a racist orgy during a promotional tour in Thailand, most people dismissed Ranieri's prospects at the King Power Stadium. In fairness to them, and I was one of them, the Italian had most recently been sacked following just 4 games, 3 of which ended in defeat, in charge of Greece, the last of which came against the Faroe Islands, and the Foxes themselves had only narrowly survived following a late-stage Great Escape the previous season. We all know what happened next, though. Despite his heroics, Ranieri was sacked midway through the following season, with Leicester mired in a relegation scrap, and in the 8 years since then, he has managed Nantes, Fulham, Roma, Sampdoria, Watford, Cagliari, and Roma again. You could hardly accuse him of slowing down after reaching Italy's statutory retirement age. Ranieri did finally retire from management at the end of last season, age 73, but only to become a senior advisor at Roma, acting as a go-between between manager Gianpiero Gasparini and the club's ownership. It appears as though Ranieri won't be coming out of his managerial retirement anytime soon, having rejected the Italy national team job in June. Brendan Rodgers, Celtic. A fellow former Leicester City boss, Brendan Rodgers finished 5th twice and won an FA Cup at the King Power Stadium, but he was still managing Liverpool 10 years ago. Premier League runners-up in the 2013-14 season, the Reds fell to 6th the following season, but Rodgers was given another pre-season to try and fix things, as a recognition of the difficulty of replacing Luis Suarez. Following just 3 wins from Liverpool's opening 8 matches, though, which left the club 10th in the Premier League table, Rodgers was sacked, prompting Thierry Henry to gently caress Jamie Carragher's thigh. Hey, we all react differently to these types of things. Rodgers next turned up at Celtic, before those 4 years at Leicester, and, despite departing in somewhat acrimonious terms, he returned to Paradise in June 2023, where he has since won back-to-back Scottish Premiership titles. Now, officially, Celtic's 3rd most successful manager of all time, Rodgers has recently expressed frustration over Celtic's lack of action and ambition in terms of recruitment, stating that the club, quote, must keep moving forward in order for him to stay. Rodgers was replaced at Liverpool mid-season by Jurgen Klopp, who went on to spend nearly 9 years at Liverpool, where he won the Premier League, League Cup, FA Cup, and the Champions League. He now works as the head of global soccer for the Red Bull Cinematic Universe, thus making Arsene Wenger's current role appear almost noble. Manuel Pellegrini, Real Betis. It's now over 11 years since Alan Pardew appeared to call Manuel Pellegrini a, quote, effing old C-word in a fairly heated touchline exchange, but whereas Pards now appears to be semi-retired, having been out of work for 2.5 years, Pellegrini is still ploughing on at the grand old age of 71, which is, it's just worth noting, only actually 7 years older than Pardew. Still, it's all relative, I suppose. A Premier League title winner in his debut campaign at Man City, Pellegrini finished second in 2014-15 and fourth in 2015-16, which is the season in question, and which was also his final season at the club. In February 2016, it was already revealed that Pellegrini would be replaced at the end of the season by Pep Guardiola, turning the Chilean into a rare lame duck head coach. He continued to carry out his duties diligently regardless, and the following season, he became one of the handful of managers to rake it in during the short-lived Chinese Super League investment boom. Following 2 years managing Hebei China Fortune, Pellegrini made an unsuccessful return to the Premier League with West Ham, but he has done a laudable job over the last 5 years at Real Betis. Since inheriting a team that had just finished 15th in La Liga, the veteran Chilean has finished between 5th and 7th in each of his 5 seasons in Seville, in addition to winning the Copa del Rey in 2022 and reaching the Conference League final last season. Louis Van Gaal, Ajax advisor. A man who won the Champions League with Ajax and has won league titles in Spain, Germany and the Netherlands, but is nonetheless probably best known for saying that pulling on someone's hair is only allowed in, quote, sex masochism in a post-match press conference after Marouane Fellaini had been sent off for elbowing Robert Huth. Louis Van Gaal wasn't the most successful Manchester United manager of all time, but he might just have been the most entertaining.
Every human being who is crept with the hair, only with sex masochism, then it is allowed, but not in other situations.
Highlights included calling his captain, Chris Smalling, Mike Smalling, in front of him in a press conference, calling Queen's Park Rangers Queen's Park Raisins, and collapsing in front of Mike Dean on the touchline. He also won an FA Cup, but who cares about that? Not Man United, clearly, as they sacked him about 5 minutes afterwards, in what could only be described as an act of sex masochism in order to bring in José Mourinho. Van Gaal retired for family reasons, or family raisins, after he was sacked at Old Trafford, but he came out of retirement briefly to manage the Netherlands in the build-up to and at the 2022 World Cup, and he became an advisor to the supervisory board at Ajax just a couple of years ago. Steve McClaren, Jamaica. A manager who dethroned not just Ajax but all of the big three in the Netherlands to win a quite remarkable Eredivisie title with FC Twente, as well as winning the League Cup and reaching a UEFA Cup final with Middlesbrough, Steve McClaren is nonetheless still best known for doing a quite bizarre Dutch accent during his time in the Netherlands 17 years ago. Hey, look, I don't make the rules. But if I did, he would still be best known for that. McClaren was a surprise appointment by Newcastle ahead of the 2015-16 season, having most recently managed Derby for 2 seasons in the Championship, and things didn't go especially well. The Dutchman, oh no, he's actually English, isn't he? It was just an accent, was sacked in March and replaced by Rafa Benitez, which led to an uptick in Newcastle's form, but it was ultimately too little too late, and Newcastle were relegated at the end of the season. McClaren subsequently rejoined Derby, followed by Queen's Park Rangers, or Queen's Park Raisins, as I prefer to call them, and in August 2024, he left Erik ten Hag's backroom staff at Manchester United, talk about leaving a sinking ship, to take charge of Jamaica's national team, where he has won 9 out of his 17 games in charge to date, and has said that jerk chicken is a little bit too spicy for him. Meanwhile, Benitez is currently unemployed, having last managed Celta Vigo. Alex Neil, Millwall. The type of manager who would be a pointless answer on the BBC quiz show Pointless, Alex Neil was Norwich City's manager for the entirety of the 2015-16 season, in which they were relegated from the Premier League. The Canaries were only in the bottom 3 for 9 weeks all season, but when that 9 includes the last one, that doesn't really count for much. Neil was sacked a couple of months before the end of the following season, with Norwich only having won 7 out of their last 24 matches, and sat 9 points outside of the Championship's playoff places. Moves to Preston, Sunderland and Stoke followed for Neil, but the 44-year-old, who was only 31 when he moved into management, took the reins at Millwall last December. He did a fantastic job at the New Den during the first half of last season, and he just beat his former club Norwich 2-1 in Millwall's opening game of this season. Ronald Koeman, the Netherlands. The Netherlands have had a strict policy of rotating between the same handful of managers ever since Ronald Koeman ended his playing career in the mid-1990s, and he has since become fortunate enough to board that gravy train. Capped 78 times during his playing days, Koeman was one of the finest defenders of his generation before moving into management with Vitesse in 2000. He was managing Southampton 10 years ago, when the Saints were one of English football's most upwardly mobile clubs. They finished 6th in the 2015-16 season, which was Koeman's second at the helm, 3 points above Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool. It was Southampton's highest top-flight league finish in over 30 years, but at the end of the season, Koeman was poached by Everton. It proved to be a pretty damaging move for everyone involved. It began Southampton's decline, though not independently it should be said. Meanwhile, Everton spent a fortune on a load of absolute dross under Koeman, where he was sacked after just 16 months. Reinvigorated with the Netherlands, Koeman joined his old club Barcelona in 2020, but he only lasted 14 months at the Camp Nou before going back to the KNVB cap in hand and asking for his job back. They gave it to him 2.5 years ago, and Koeman has since reached the semi-finals of his only major tournament in charge, and he should have at least one more left in the tank before he is replaced by either Dick Advocaat, Gus Hiddink, or Louis Van Gaal. I don't care if they've got a combined age of 378, it is Dutch law at this point, like cycling everywhere and doing ket for breakfast. Mark Hughes, Carlisle United. Either Mark Hughes has a gambling addiction or a laudable love of the game because, no matter how far his stock seems to fall, he refuses to give up on management. Once lauded for his top 7 finishes at Blackburn, and poached by Man City for a world record-breaking compensation fee, amidst additional interest from Chelsea, as recently as 9 years ago, Hughes had just guided Stoke to a highly creditable, 3rd consecutive 9th place finish. Things soured towards the end of the Welshman's time in Staffordshire, though his successors certainly haven't fared any better, and rushing back into management with Southampton proved to be ill-judged. The Saints were sat in the relegation zone when Hughes was sacked and replaced by Ralph Hasenhüttl, and it would be over 3 years before Hughes managed again. When he returned, having never managed outside of the Premier League in club football before, Hughes dropped down to manage Bradford in League Two. He was sacked after 20 months with the Bantams languishing in 18th place, and in February, he took charge of League Two crisis club Carlisle United, who've since been relegated to the National League. Dick Advocaat, Curaçao. A Dick Advocaat isn't just one way of describing Bonnie Blue, it is also a football manager. Indeed, Big Dick, as he is affectionately known among friends, is one of the managers in the Dutch national team's managerial merry-go-round. Advocaat has managed the Netherlands on 3 occasions since first taking charge of them back in 1992, and he managed the country's women's team even earlier than that. 10 years ago, Advocaat was managing Sunderland during a period in which the Black Cats would look doomed each season, appoint a firebrand head coach to save them, and then start the whole process all over again. Advocaat was no exception, keeping Sunderland up, before being binned in favour of Sam Allardyce. Advocaat has had 28 different jobs in football, and 8 of them since leaving Sunderland alone, including Fenerbahçe, Iraq's national team, and yes, the Netherlands again. Age 77, Advocaat is now one of the oldest managers in world football, but in January 2024, he took on yet another new challenge, managing Curaçao's national team. Advocaat has 8 wins from his first 14 matches in charge, though, arguably, his most impressive result has been a 1-1 draw with Canada at the 2025 CONCACAF Gold Cup. Allardyce, meanwhile, a man who is probably best known for drinking both white wine and gravy by the pint, has been out of work since taking Leeds down in 2023, despite being a spring chicken compared to Advocaat at only 70, and also now runs a podcast which I believe is, and I'm not joking here, called No Tippy Tappy Football. Gary Monk, Tibetan monk. In one of the most extraordinary examples of nominative determinism, since managing in the Premier League, Gary Monk has turned his back upon the materialist world of professional football, relocated to Tibet, and dedicated his life to Buddhism. No, not really. He last managed Cambridge United. Following an excellent first full season in management at Swansea, in which he finished 8th in the Premier League, the 2015-16 season proved to be a tough one for Monk. He was sacked in December with the Swans having won only 1 out of their last 11 matches, and replaced by Francisco Guidolin. Monk has since managed Leeds, Middlesbrough, Birmingham City, Sheffield Wednesday, and Cambridge United, with his stock falling at about the same rate as Boeing's over the last 7 years. Having most recently been sacked while sitting bottom of the entire Football League, maybe Monk will consider actually becoming a Tibetan monk now, and then that joke won't seem so silly, will it? Monk's replacement, Francisco Guidolin, hasn't had a management job since 2016, presumably choosing to retire following the humiliation of being sacked and replaced by Bob Bradley. Maurizio Pochettino, the USA. The 2015-16 season was Maurizio Pochettino's second at Tottenham, and it was the first time in 6 seasons that Spurs qualified for the Champions League. Spurs trailed Leicester by just 2 points at the beginning of March, with a superior goal difference, following 6 wins on the bounce. But failure to win any of their last 4 matches saw them fall to 3rd place, 1 point behind Arsenal and 11 behind Leicester. They did finish as Premier League runners-up the following season, in Tottenham's highest league finish in over 50 years, but they were still 7 points behind title winners Chelsea, and that gap widened to an enormous 23 points when they finished 3rd in 2017-18. Nonetheless, Pochettino did a fairly outstanding job at Tottenham, operating on a smaller budget and wage bill than any of his rivals. His time at Tottenham ended in December 2019, and it was followed by brief stints with both PSG and Chelsea. After Chelsea and Pochettino mutually agreed to part company, in not very amicable terms it should be said, Pochettino became the United States' head coach in September 2024, an attractive job owing to both a fat paycheck and the chance to manage the US at a home World Cup in 2026. The US MNT looked to be shaping up as a strong squad ahead of co-hosting the World Cup, with several talented youngsters and whispers of a golden generation in some quarters, but that's not how things have so far shaped up. It is actually a bit of a mess at the minute, in terms of the national team camp, dynamic, and how some players' careers have stalled or declined in recent times, so much so that I might even make a video about it. That's not for today though. Stay disciplined, Alfie. Quique Sanchez Flores. Unemployed. You're not going to believe this, but Watford only had 1 manager throughout the entire 2015-16 season. I know, I had to recheck it 7 times as well, but I'm afraid it's true. Quique Sanchez Flores probably deserves the freedom of Hertfordshire for pulling off such a remarkable feat, on par with Leicester's title win, Messi's 91 goals in a calendar year, and Tim Sherwood convincing Sky Sports to pay him to be a pundit. The former Spain, Valencia and Real Madrid fullback replaced Slavisa Jokanovic at Watford in the summer of 2015, despite the fact that Jokanovic had just won the Hornets' automatic promotion to the Premier League. I know, right? That's more like it. Flores had been out of work since his second spell at Getafe ended prematurely, but he led Watford to a comfortable mid-table finish in 13th and an FA Cup semi-final, for which he was awarded with the sack. You'll love to see it. Flores has since managed Espanyol, Shanghai Shenhua and Watford again. Of course he bloody has, that time for only 3 months, Getafe for a 3rd time, and Sevilla. The Spanish Phil Brown, as he is sometimes referred to, mostly by me, has been out of work since guiding Sevilla to safety in the 2023-24 season, making occasional appearances as a pundit on Spanish television. Tony Pulis, DPD driver. Out of work since being sacked by Sheffield Wednesday almost 5 years ago, Tony Pulis retired from management after 5 weeks working for Depon Chansiri, turning his hand to delivering parcels instead in 2023. Speaking to Lad Bible shortly after his career change, Pulis stated, quote, "I don't need the money at this point. It's just nice interacting with people, especially when you're delivering something that they might be excited about." The comments about, can I do it on a cold rainy night in Stoke, soon get old, but the van does have all-weather tyres, so the answer is yes, I can. End quote. No, not really. He actually works for UPS. No, I am still being stupid, but if you fell for both Gary Monk being a Tibetan monk and Tony Pulis delivering parcels for DPD, then I fear for you if you are ever a victim of a financial scam, and you must now confess to your gullibility down in the comments. Pulis was managing West Brom in the 2015-16 season, in which the Baggies finished 14th, but he was sacked during the 2017-18 season and replaced by Alan Pardew as West Brom went on to finish bottom of the Premier League. Stints at Middlesbrough and Sheffield Wednesday did about as much damage to Pulis' career as Hurricane Patricia did to much of Central America in 2015, and he has been without a club since December 2020. In May of this year, Pulis flew out to Egypt to meet with representatives from Zamalek about becoming the club's new sporting director, and no, that one isn't a joke. It was reported as a done deal at one stage, before complete radio silence, so one can only assume one or both parties changed their minds. Maybe it's because he took a job as a delivery driver for DPD. We can't rule it out. Slaven Bilic, unemployed. Ending this video with a trio of unemployed managers, unless you count working for DPD, Slaven Bilic was managing, and why wouldn't you? Slaven Bilic was managing West Ham in the 2015-16 season, and he was managing them very well. In their final season at Upton Park, West Ham went out with a bang. Dimitri Payet was the star of the show, as the Hammers finished 7th and qualified for Europe ahead of Liverpool and Chelsea. Having starred at Euro 2016 as well, however, Payet was persistently linked with a move away from West Ham all summer. The club even gave him a £1 million loyalty bonus to stay at the club, but in the January, amidst interest from his former club Marseille, Payet told West Ham that he wanted to leave. Bilic appeared visibly broken when he had to break the news in public, and I'm not sure that he ever fully recovered. Stints at Al Ittihad, West Brom, Beijing, Guan, Watford, obviously, and Al Fatih have followed, also known as the Big Five, of course, but the Croatian has been out of work since his last contract in Saudi Arabia was terminated, almost exactly a year ago to the day. Well, that is it for today's video, which I would like to add, just in case you're wondering why I sounded increasingly delusional and confused as it went on, that, like the last one, it was recorded in approximately 75-degree heat. And I'm not referring to Fahrenheit. I am starting to shrivel up, a bit like a Queen's Park raisin. Thank you all as ever for watching though, you beautiful bastards. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. Hit the like button if that was the case, or just if you're feeling cute. Let me know your thoughts on both Gary Monk becoming a Tibetan monk and Tony Pulis now working for DPD down below in the comments. And make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for both the stupidest and the second stupidest channels on YouTube. I am referring, of course, to HITC Sevens and Alfie Potts Harmer, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might enjoy watching after this one. They're probably less stupid. You can also find me on various social media platforms, should you be a total lunatic, typically via the username at HITC Sevens, and you can now support me additionally, I know, you were wondering, if you are both willing and able, either via the Alfie Potts Harmer YouTube channel, where you can become a channel member or leave a super chat, or via buymeacoffee.com/Alfie Potts Harmer, where you can join 38 other brilliant, beautiful people in doing the same, but over there, Google don't steal 30% of it, the techno-feudalist scumbags. Anyway, I love you all, please take care out there, I'll see you next time, enjoy the start of the Premier League season, cheers!